The summer sun shimmered over the still waters of the lake as I tied off my boat to the small wooden dock outside my cabin. This boat wasn't just a luxury, it had been in my family for years, passed down from my grandfather who had taught me to fish, navigate and respect the water. To me it was history, tradition and home. That's why I was caught off guard when I returned from a quiet morning fishing trip, only to find a bright orange notice plastered on the side of the dock. The fee. Paper was bold, aggressive and almost mocking in its choice of words. Violation notice, unauthorized watercraft. I frowned, reading it twice. Unauthorized? This was my boat, my dock and, most importantly, my lake. My cabin had been built decades ago, before the neighborhood association even existed. Back then, the lake was privately purchased by my grandfather, who had made sure the rights were written clearly into the deed. Yet here stood the HOA, flexing their supposed authority, declaring my boat non-compliant. The next day, I was called to a mandatory HOA meeting. I walked into their pristine clubhouse, the walls lined with rules and regulations that seemed to multiply every month. Karen, the infamous HOA president, stood at the front, clipboard in hand, glaring at me as if I had committed some unforgivable crime. "Your boat violates community guidelines," she announced, voice dripping with smugness. "It's unsightly, takes up dock space and doesn't meet our approved dimensions. If you refuse to remove it, the HOA will fine you $500 a day until it's gone." The room went silent. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact. I stood still, my jaw tightening, as Karen smiled like she had already won. I asked calmly, "What gives you the right to tell me what I can and can't do with my own property?" Karen's lips curved upward. "Because this lake is for the community, not for one man's personal amusement. The board decides what's acceptable here, not you." I almost laughed. The sheer arrogance, the blind confidence that they owned what they clearly didn't, was both infuriating and oddly entertaining. I didn't argue, not yet. Instead, I let her talk, let her rattle off her threats, her deadlines, and her carefully manufactured authority. By the time I left the meeting, Karen was already telling other board members about the fines she would start issuing the very next day. She didn't realize I hadn't said a word in defense because I didn't need to. The truth was simple, and soon it would shatter the little empire she thought she ran because she didn't own the lake. The HOA didn't own the lake. I did, and it was time they found out. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hammering. When I stepped outside, I saw workers setting up a massive sign at the community dock. "Unauthorized boats will be towed, HOA property." Karen was there, directing them with that same smug smile. She saw me standing by my dock and called out, "Better. Get rid of that old thing before it's gone for you." That was the last straw. I went back inside, grabbed the thick folder of deeds and records my grandfather had kept so carefully, and walked down to the dock where a group of curious neighbors had already gathered. I held the documents high. Before the HOA finds another resident, maybe they should learn what they actually own and what they don't. Karen crossed her arms. "Oh, please. You think a few papers are going to stop the board?" I opened the top folder and read aloud, my voice steady but commanding. "This lake, every drop of it, was purchased by my grandfather in 1968. The ownership rights passed down legally to me and are still active today, meaning this water, this shoreline, and everything tied to it is my private property. The HOA has no legal claim over it, none." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's smirk faltered. I continued, "Which means not only do you have no say over my boat, you don't even have the right to use this lake without my permission." Silence. All eyes turned to Karen, her face drained of color, her confidence cracking like thin ice. For years she had acted like queen of the community, dictating rules, enforcing fines, and intimidating homeowners into compliance. But now the truth was out. Her so-called authority stopped at the shoreline. One of the neighbors, emboldened, asked, "So wait, does that mean every boat here, every dock, is here only because you allow it?" I nodded. "Exactly." Murmurs spread quickly. Some people looked relieved, realizing they were free from HOA harassment. Others looked horrified, realizing they'd been bullied into paying for lake fees that Karen and her board had no right to charge. Karen tried to recover, her voice shaking. This must be some mistake. We've always controlled the lake." I handed her a copy of the deed. "Read it yourself. The only mistake here is you thinking you had power you never did." By that evening, the community was in chaos, but not for me. Neighbors came to my door, apologizing forever, siding with Karen's rules, thanking me for standing up. A few even asked if they could sign formal agreements with me to use the lake, agreements that I gladly made fair and simple, unlike the HOA's endless rules. Karen, however, wasn't done. She called an emergency HOA meeting to dispute ownership. She tried to rally her board, waving her clipboard as though paperwork could erase decades of legal records. But it was useless. Once my lawyer sent a certified notice reminding them of the legal ownership, along with a warning of potential fraud charges for every lake fee they had collected, their fight collapsed overnight. The irony? The HOA that tried to fine me for my boat now had to come to me for permission every time they wanted to host an event by the water. The so-called community lake was mine all along, and no threats, fines, or phony rules could ever change that. As I sat on my boat one evening, watching the sun set over the water, I couldn't help but smile. The lake was quiet again, peaceful. And for the first time in years, I knew it was finally safe from HOA corruption. Karen had tried to take my boat. Instead, she lost the entire lake. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and join us at HOA Karen Stories for more unbelievable tales of HOA power gone wrong.